England, 1861. Spring. The rose died at exactly 3 o'clock. Lady Marianne Ashford watched it happen from across the conservatory. One perfect crimson petal detaching, drifting through a shaft of afternoon light, landing soundlessly on marble. Beautiful things always knew when their time was finished. She understood that feeling intimately. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let us return to our main character. 41 years old, unmarried, unremarkable. The invisible woman in every drawing room she entered, moving through London society like furniture that no one bothered to dust anymore. The conversation behind her confirmed it. Still attending functions at her age? One would think. Marianne didn't turn. She'd perfected the art of pretending not to hear. 20 years of practice had made her an expert in dignified indifference. She stepped closer to examine the orchids instead. White blooms with purple throats, exotic and untouchable behind their glass. Rather like the debutantes she'd watched parade past her for 2 decades. Fresh. Perfect. Everything she would never be again. The conservatory door opened. She felt the shift before she heard footsteps. That peculiar electricity that enters a room with certain people. The kind who commands space simply by existing in it. The Cymbidium, came a voice behind her. Deep, assured, dangerously close. Remarkably resilient for something so delicate in appearance. Marianne's breath caught. She knew that voice. Everyone in England knew that voice. Slowly, she turned. Alastair Hawthorne, Duke of Ravensmere, stood 3 paces away, his grey eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made the glass walls feel suddenly warmer. Tall, dark-haired, devastatingly handsome in the way that made young women forget how to breathe and their mothers forget all propriety. For 15 years he'd refused every match, declined every introduction, danced with no one. So why was he looking at her like that? Your Grace, she managed, dropping into a curtsy that felt awkward under his unwavering gaze. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he studied her face with the focused attention of someone examining a rare manuscript, searching for something, though she couldn't imagine what. Lady Marianne Ashford, he said finally. Not a question, a statement. Her heart stumbled. You know my name. I make it my business to know interesting things. Interesting. No one had called her interesting in years. Respectable, yes. Well-bred, certainly. Pitiable occasionally, but never interesting. I'm afraid you've mistaken me for someone else, Your Grace. There's nothing remotely interesting about... You've been standing in this conservatory for 17 minutes, he interrupted, taking a step closer, observing the orchids as though you're memorizing them. Most people glance and move on. You see them. Marianne blinked, unsettled by his observation. They're beautiful. They're complex, he corrected. There's a difference. Beauty is common. Complexity is rare. The air between them felt charged, impossible. This couldn't be happening. Dukes did not seek out spinsters in conservatories. They certainly didn't speak to them about orchids and complexity with voices that made her skin prickle with awareness. I should return to have dinner with me. The words stopped her mid-sentence. I beg your pardon? Dinner. Tomorrow evening. My residence. His expression remained perfectly composed, as though he'd asked about the weather rather than issued an invitation that would scandalize half of London. "Your Grace, I don't understand. We've only just met?" "Yes, which is precisely why I'm inviting you to dinner, to continue the conversation." He tilted his head slightly. "Unless you're otherwise engaged." Marianne's mind raced. This was madness, a trick, some cruel game she couldn't identify. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. Something flickered in his eyes. Approval, perhaps, or recognition. "Because in a ballroom full of women desperate for my attention, you were the only one not looking at me." He paused. "Until now." Their gazes locked, and Marianne felt the ground shift beneath her feet. 7 o'clock, he said quietly. "I'll send my carriage." Then he did something that would fuel gossip for weeks. From inside his coat, he withdrew a single white rose, fresh, perfect, impossible, and offered it to her. "For your collection," he murmured. Before she could respond, before she could breathe, he bowed and walked away, leaving her standing in the conservatory with trembling hands and a flower that felt like a promise, or a threat. Behind her, the whispers began immediately. "Did you see? The Duke just with her?" But Marianne barely heard them. She stared at the white rose in her hands, her heart beating in a rhythm it had forgotten decades ago, and wondered if beautiful things really did know when their time was finished. Or if perhaps, impossibly, some stories were only just beginning. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, London's most elusive bachelor would make his intentions devastatingly clear. Tomorrow, Lady Marianne Ashford would discover that being overlooked for 20 years had only made her more visible to the one man who mattered. But tonight, she had a rose and a choice. The stories about Alistair Hawthorne had circulated for so long they'd become legend. 3 seasons ago, he'd walked away from Lady Catherine Brentwood mid-introduction when she giggled at his title. Last year, he'd declined an opera invitation from the daughter of an earl because she couldn't name a single composer. The season before that, he'd left a ball after 20 minutes when surrounded by matrimonial ambitions masquerading as conversation. 15 years of refusals. 15 years of London's most beautiful, most accomplished, most eligible young women presented like sacrificial offerings to a man who seemed utterly immune to their charms. The ton whispered he had a heart of ice. Some suggested he preferred solitude to company. Others hinted at darker reasons for his perpetual bachelorhood. None of them knew the truth, that Alistair wasn't cold, merely exhausted by superficiality. That night, alone in his study with brandy and silence, he couldn't stop seeing her face. Lady Marianne Ashford, 41, overlooked, invisible to everyone but him. The way she'd studied those orchids with genuine fascination rather than performative interest, the startled vulnerability in her eyes when he'd spoken her name, the intelligence flickering beneath years of practiced invisibility. He'd watched her for 3 weeks before approaching, noticed how she moved through crowds like water, present but unobserved, how her eyes held more depth than any debutante's studied flutter, how she listened when others spoke, truly listened, rather than waiting for her turn to perform. She'd rattled something loose in him, something he'd kept locked away for years. Across London, Marianne sat at her writing desk, the white rose in a crystal vase beside her. She'd tried to dismiss the encounter a dozen times since returning home. A momentary curiosity, a duke's whim, nothing more. Yet her hands still trembled when she touched the petals. Nothing, she told herself firmly. It was nothing. But she couldn't quite make herself believe it. The knock came at 6 in the morning. Marianne woke to her maid's frantic whispers and descended the stairs in her dressing gown to find the entrance hall transformed into a garden. Roses everywhere, white, cream, palest pink, arranged in crystal vases that caught the early light and scattered it like diamonds across the walls. 41, her housekeeper breathed, counting. Exactly 41 roses, my lady. One for each year. The symbolism struck her chest like a fist. The card bore only his seal and 4 words in bold script. You are not invisible. The servants whispered. Within hours, the entire street knew. By afternoon, all of Mayfair buzzed with the scandal. Her brother Frederick arrived before noon, his face thunderous. Marianne, what have you done? The Duke of Ravensmere? 41 roses? London is speaking of nothing else. I've done nothing, she protested, though her voice shook. We spoke briefly at a conservatory, that's all. That's never all with a man like Ravensmere. Frederick paced like a caged animal. Do you understand what this means? The attention, the scrutiny? If he's toying with you, he's not. How can you possibly know that? She couldn't answer. She didn't know. She only knew that no one had ever looked at her the way the Duke had in that glass-walled room. The Pembroke family sent no flowers. Lady Honoria and her daughter Clarissa had spent 2 seasons attempting to secure Ravensmere's attention. Now their drawing room burned with rage and wounded pride. By evening, Marianne's world had tilted completely off its axis. When the butler announced His Grace, the Duke of Ravensmere, at 7 o'clock precisely, she thought her heart might stop entirely. He stood in her doorway holding nothing but purpose in his eyes. The carriage is waiting, he said simply. Unless you've changed your mind about dinner. Every rational thought screamed that she should decline, should protect herself, should not step into whatever dangerous game this was. But Marianne found herself nodding, found herself reaching for her cloak, found herself for the first time in 20 years saying yes to something that terrified her. The orchids at Kew Gardens bloomed in impossible colors. Purple-black, sunset orange, green so deep it looked like emerald glass. Alistair guided her through the palm house with a hand at the small of her back, a touch so light she might have imagined it if not for the heat radiating through layers of fabric. You see things others miss, he observed, watching her examine a particularly intricate bloom. Most visitors walk past these. You stop. You notice. They're complex, she replied, remembering his words from the conservatory. There's a difference between beauty and complexity. His smile was worth every whisper that would follow this outing. You were listening. I always listen. The admission came easier than it should have. Perhaps that's why I'm so often overlooked. I watch rather than perform. They walked deeper into the glass cathedral, surrounded by tropical air and the scent of living things. Other visitors moved past them, couples, families, society matrons who stared openly at the Duke and his unexpected companion. Tell me something true, Alistair said suddenly. Something you've never told anyone. Marianne hesitated, feeling exposed under his steady gaze. I dream of travel. Real travel, not just fashionable tours. Egypt, Greece, India. I want to see the Taj Mahal by moonlight, stand before the Parthenon, sail down the Nile and sketch ruins that are older than memory. Why haven't you? Because 41-year-old spinsters don't travel alone. Because society expects me to fade gracefully into the wallpaper. Because I've spent so long being invisible that I'd forgotten I once had visible dreams. His hand found hers among the ferns. You're not invisible to me, Marianne. You never were. The intimacy of her given name on his lips sent heat flooding through her. Around them she could feel eyes watching, minds calculating, tongues preparing to wag. "This will cause talk," she warned quietly. "Let it." His thumb traced patterns on her palm. "I've spent 15 years refusing what society expects. I'm not about to start conforming now." They emerged from the palm house into afternoon light, and Marianne saw them immediately. 3 society matrons, their faces sharp with curiosity and judgment. Tomorrow's gossip pages would write themselves. But walking beside Alistair, his hand steady on hers, she found she couldn't quite bring herself to care. For the first time in decades, she felt visible, and it was terrifying, and wonderful, and absolutely impossible to resist. The wolves came for her on Tuesday. Lady Honoria Pembroke led the charge with the precision of a military general and the mercy of none. She arrived during calling hours with her daughter Clarissa and 2 allies, their silk gowns rustling like predators circling prey. "Dear Lady Marianne," Honoria began, her smile sharp enough to draw blood. "We simply had to call after hearing the most extraordinary rumors. Surely it cannot be true that the Duke has been paying you particular attention." Marianne's teacup trembled slightly. "His Grace has been very kind." "Kind?" Clarissa laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "Mother, she thinks he's being kind. How perfectly innocent." "My dear," Honoria leaned forward, false sympathy dripping from every word. "You must understand, men like the Duke sometimes develop peculiar fascinations. Novelty, you see, it passes, and when it does, well, the fall can be quite devastating for ladies of a certain age who've allowed themselves to hope." The words landed like calculated blows. Marianne felt each one, felt the old insecurities rising like floodwater. That evening, her mother arrived. Lady Margaret Ashford hadn't visited in months, but scandal travelled faster than maternal concern. "Marianne, what are you thinking?" Her mother paced the drawing room, agitation in every gesture. "You're 41. Past marriageable age, past childbearing. What could a duke possibly want with you beyond temporary amusement? Perhaps he enjoys my company." "Company?" Her mother's voice rose. "Men like Ravensmere marry girls who can give them heirs. Beautiful girls, young girls. You're setting yourself up for heartbreak and humiliation." The words cut deeper coming from her own mother. The suggestion that she was somehow defective, past her usefulness, unworthy of genuine affection. But then the butler appeared with a card on a silver tray. Lady Selina Hawthorne, the Duke's sister, had come to call. Selina swept into the room like a force of nature. Tall, elegant, with her brother's grey eyes, and none of society's false courtesy. She assessed the situation instantly, her gaze moving from Marianne's pale face to her mother's flushed one. "Lady Margaret," Selina said coolly. "How fortunate." "I was just telling my brother how delighted our family is by his choice. Lady Marianne is precisely the woman Ravensmere needs. Intelligent, dignified, and refreshingly free of the vapid ambition that's been thrown at him for years." Margaret stammered. "But surely the age difference is inconsequential." Selina's voice could have frozen wine. "My brother is 38, not 18. He requires a partner, not a child bride. Lady Marianne is perfect." After they left, Marianne stood alone in her drawing room, hands shaking, mind reeling. The attack had been brutal, the defence unexpected, and somewhere across London, the Duke was doubling down on his intentions, sending word through his sister that he would call tomorrow, that he wasn't backing away, that the wolves could circle all they wanted. He'd already made his choice. Dear listener, if Marianne's story is touching your heart, we need your help. We're on a mission to reach 5,000 subscribers in just 2 weeks, and every single subscription matters. By subscribing, you're not just supporting our channel, you're telling us these stories of late-blooming love, second chances, and defying society's cruel expectations matter to you. Hit that subscribe button now. Let's prove together that stories like Marianne's deserve to be heard. Thank you for being part of this journey. The estate appeared through morning mist like something from a dream. Grey stone towers rising above ancient oaks, gardens that stretched toward distant hills, a house that had watched centuries pass and still stood magnificent. Ravensmere, the Duke's ancestral home, and Marianne was about to enter it. The carriage rolled up the long drive, and she fought the urge to ask the driver to turn around. This was madness. She didn't belong in a place like this, among people like these. But then Alistair emerged from the entrance, taking the steps 2 at a time, and the look on his face, relief, joy, something fierce and possessive, made her breath catch. "You came," he said simply, handing her down himself rather than waiting for the footman. "You asked." His smile was sunlight breaking through clouds. "Come, everyone's eager to meet you." The entrance hall alone could have swallowed her London home twice over. But it wasn't the grandeur that struck her, it was the warmth. Fresh flowers everywhere, light streaming through tall windows, the sense that this massive house was somehow impossibly a home. Lady Selina appeared first, embracing Marianne like a sister rather than a stranger. "Finally! Alistair's been pacing since dawn. Come, leave him to his brooding and let me show you the portrait gallery. You should know what you're getting into with this family." The morning passed in a blur of introductions. The Duke's cousin James, who welcomed her with genuine kindness. The housekeeper Mrs. Davies, who'd known Alistair since birth and whose eyes grew suspiciously bright when she looked at Marianne. Even the staff seemed pleased by her presence, as though her arrival had lifted some long-standing shadow from the house. But it was watching Alistair here, in his own domain, that truly changed everything. He showed her the library, thousands of volumes collected across generations, the conservatory where he grew orchids himself, the gallery where he'd hang her artwork, he said, when she finally let herself paint again after years of denying that dream. He spoke of Ravensmere not as property, but as legacy, responsibility, home. And he spoke of it as though she already belonged here. In the blue drawing room overlooking the rose garden, away from the others, he took her hands in his. "I know this is overwhelming," he said quietly. "The house, the title, the expectations, but I need you to understand something, Marianne. I'm not offering you a position. I'm offering you a partnership, a life. Everything I am and everything this place represents, I want to share it with you." "Why?" The question escaped as a whisper. "Why me, Alistair, when you could have anyone?" "Because you see me." His voice was raw with honesty. "Not the Duke, not the fortune or the title or the estate. You see the man who grows orchids and gets lost in books and has spent 15 years alone because everyone else only saw what I represented." He cupped her face gently. "You see me, Marianne. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" Standing in that sunlit room, his hands warm on her skin, Marianne felt something shift deep inside her. The voice that had whispered, "Too old, too plain, too late," for 20 years, grew suddenly quiet. Maybe, just maybe, she was exactly enough. The next 3 weeks felt like living in a fever dream. Alistair called daily, sent books with passages marked that made her laugh, appeared at gallery exhibitions to discuss art until the docents asked them to leave so they could close, took her riding in Hyde Park at dawn when society was still sleeping so they could talk without performing. She was falling, hard and helplessly, into something that terrified her more than anything in her life. And the wolves noticed. The rumors escalated from whispers to roars. Lady Honoria spread stories of impropriety. Others suggested Marianne had trapped the Duke somehow, used feminine arts, or worse. One particularly vicious gossip column implied she'd be cast aside the moment the Duke tired of his experiment with older women. The cruelest cut came from an unexpected source. "You should end this before you're hurt." Her brother Frederick stood in her drawing room, his face heavy with concern that felt like condemnation. "Ravensmere will realize his mistake eventually. Men of his standing marry young women who can give them heirs. You can't possibly believe he'll actually propose." "He's already proposed," she said quietly. 3 days ago. I haven't given him an answer." Frederick's face went white. "Marianne, no. Think about what you're risking. Your dignity, our family's reputation." "What dignity?" The words burst out sharp and bitter. "The dignity of being invisible, of watching life happen to everyone else while I fade into the wallpaper. I'm 41, Frederick. If I don't take this chance now, there won't be another." But doubt, once planted, grew with vicious speed. That night, alone, Marianne stared at the ring Alistair had given her. A sapphire surrounded by diamonds chosen because it matched her eyes. She held it up to the lamplight and let every insecurity flood back. Too old, too plain. He'll realize. He'll leave. You'll be humiliated. Everyone will laugh. You're not enough. You've never been enough. It's too late for you. At dawn, she wrote him a letter refusing the proposal. By noon, he was at her door. "No," Alistair said flatly, when she tried to hand him the letter. "I'm not accepting this. You don't have a choice. Neither do you." He stepped into her drawing room uninvited, his eyes blazing with something between fury and fear. "Do you think I don't know what they're saying? What your family's saying? What you're telling yourself in the dark when no one's watching?" She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. "You're afraid," he continued, his voice gentling. "I understand fear, Marianne. I've been afraid for 15 years. Afraid I'd never find someone who saw past the title. Afraid I'd spend my life alone rather than settled for something false. And then I found you. Do you think I'm going to let you disappear back into the shadows because society is cruel, and your own mind is crueler? I'm trying to save us both. From what? Happiness?" He closed the distance between them. "You've spent 20 years making yourself invisible. I will not let you do it again. Not now. Not when we're this close to something real. What if I can't give you children? Then we'll have nieces and nephews and a house full of life anyway. What if society never accepts? Society can go to hell. What if I'm not enough?" The words came out broken, the deepest fear finally spoken. "What if you wake up one day and realize you've bound yourself to a woman past her prime, past her usefulness, past everything that matters?" Alistair caught her face in his hands. "You listen to me, Marianne Ashford. You are 41 years old. You are intelligent, passionate, beautiful in ways that have nothing to do with age and everything to do with who you are. You are more than enough. You have always been enough. The world failed to see it. Don't you fail too?" She broke. 20 years of holding herself together shattered, and she wept against his chest while he held her like something precious. "Marry me," he whispered into her hair. "Not because you think you should. Not because you're afraid of losing this chance. Marry me because you want this life. Because you want me. Because you're ready to stop hiding." and Marianne realized the most terrifying thing wasn't that he might leave. It was that he wouldn't, that he meant every word, that she actually had to choose. Alistair brought her to Ravensmere 3 days later, to the lake garden where willows trailed fingers in green water and ancient roses climbed stone walls. It was the most beautiful place she'd ever seen, private, eternal, perfect. "I brought you here for a reason," he said, leading her along the path. "This garden was created by the 3rd Duchess 200 years ago. She was 39 when she married my ancestor. Society said she was too old. Her family said it wouldn't last. The rumors were vicious." They stopped at the water's edge, where a stone bench sat beneath a flowering tree. "They had 47 years together," Alistair continued. "Built this garden, raised children, left letters that still exist in our library about how deeply they loved each other." He turned to face her fully. She wrote that marrying at 39 meant she knew exactly who she was and what she wanted. That she brought her whole self to the marriage, not just youthful hope. Marianne's throat tightened. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're not too old, Marianne. You're exactly the right age, old enough to know yourself, young enough to build a whole life, old enough to have wisdom, young enough to have decades ahead of us." He reached into his coat. "And because I want you to understand what I'm offering." The ring he pulled out wasn't the sapphire from before. This was older, more intricate, an emerald surrounded by tiny diamonds that caught the light like captured stars. "This belonged to that 3rd Duchess," he said softly. "It's been waiting in the family vault for someone worthy, someone strong enough to wear it." His voice dropped to something raw. "Someone like you." Then Alistair Hawthorne, Duke of Ravensmere, the man who'd refused every match for 15 years, knelt in the grass beside the green water. "I'm not asking you to become someone you're not," he said, looking up at her with absolute certainty in his eyes. "I'm not asking you to shrink yourself or hide or play a role. I'm asking you to be exactly who you are, brilliant, passionate, complex, real, and let me love you for it. Let me build a life with you. Let me show you Egypt and Greece and every place you've dreamed of. Let me give you everything you've been denied, not because you need saving, but because you deserve joy." Tears blurred Marianne's vision. "Alistair." "I know you're afraid. I know society has been cruel. I know your own mind tells you terrible lies about your worth." His voice shook slightly. "But I need you to hear this. You are wanted. Not tolerated. Not settled for. Wanted. Chosen. Cherished. I want you, Marianne. Every year of you. Every scar and fear and dream. I want the life we'll build together. I want to wake up beside you when we're 60 and 70 and 80, still arguing about art and books and whether the orchids need more light." He held up the ring, his hand steady even as emotion roughened his words. "So I'm asking you one more time. Marry me. Not because it's safe or expected. Marry me because you want this life, this love, me. Marry me because you're brave enough to choose happiness even when it terrifies you. Marry me because 41 isn't too late. It's exactly right." The moment stretched between them, balanced on a knife's edge. Marianne looked at this impossible man kneeling before her. Looked at the garden built by a woman who defied society 2 centuries ago. Looked at the life being offered, not as charity, but as partnership, as choice, as love. And she realized she'd spent 20 years shrinking. 20 years invisible. 20 years safe and lonely, and half alive. She was done shrinking. Yes. The word came out steady and sure, stronger than she'd expected. Yes, I'll marry you. Alistair surged to his feet, sliding the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, and then his mouth was on hers, desperate, reverent, claiming. She kissed him back with 20 years of denied passion, of suppressed longing, of finally letting herself want something and believing she deserved it. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers. You won't regret this, he promised. I know, she whispered. And meant it. Because standing in that ancient garden, wearing a ring from a duchess who'd defied her own era's cruelty, Marianne Ashford finally understood something profound. Her story wasn't over. It was just beginning. The wedding took place 6 weeks later at Ravensmere's private chapel, under June roses, and before a small gathering of people who genuinely celebrated their union. No massive society spectacle, no performance, just vows spoken in sunlight, witnessed by those who mattered. When Alistair kissed her as his wife, the chapel erupted in applause, and Marianne felt something shift in her chest, the last weight of doubt lifting, leaving only certainty. Society, of course, lost its collective mind. The gossip pages ran stories for weeks. The matrons clutched their pearls. Lady Honoria Pembroke left London entirely for her country estate, unable to face the reality that the Duke had married the woman she'd mocked. But something unexpected happened as the months passed. The scandal began to fade, replaced by something else. Curiosity, then reluctant admiration, then quiet acceptance. Because Marianne didn't play the role of apologetic interloper. She stepped into her position as Duchess with the same quiet dignity she'd always possessed, now amplified by confidence and genuine happiness. She opened Ravensmere's library to scholars, commissioned artists, travelled with Alistair to Egypt and Greece, sending back letters that circulated through society describing temples and ruins with such passion that even the most jaded readers felt moved. And slowly, imperceptibly, their marriage began to reshape London's imagination of what was possible. Other women, older women who'd been invisible, started appearing more boldly in society, started speaking up, started believing that maybe, just maybe, their lives weren't over at 30. On their first anniversary, Alistair found Marianne in the conservatory, sketching orchids with the confidence of someone who'd reclaimed her dreams. Happy? He asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. She leaned into him, studying the ring that still caught her breath sometimes, the emerald that had waited 2 centuries for her. Absurdly. No regrets about marrying the most stubborn duke in England. Only that I didn't say yes faster. She turned in his arms, rising on tiptoe to kiss him, though I suppose the dramatic pause made for a better story. He laughed, that free, unguarded sound she'd learned to treasure. A story for the ages, the Duke and the invisible woman. I was never invisible, Marianne corrected softly. I was just waiting for someone who knew how to look. That evening, as they dressed for dinner, she caught her reflection in the mirror, 42 now, with silver threads in her auburn hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of laughter more than sorrow. She looked different than she had a year ago. Not younger, she'd never chased that impossible standard again, but she looked alive, seen, loved, and she finally understood what the third Duchess had written in those letters 200 years ago, that coming into love at 40 meant bringing your whole self, scars and wisdom and dreams intact, that it meant building something real rather than performing something expected. London had called their marriage a scandal. History would call it a love story. but Marianne called it something simpler. Her life. Finally, fully, beautifully hers. And she was just getting started. Dear, beautiful soul, thank you for staying with us through Marianne and Alistair's journey, from that first rose in the conservatory to the Duchess she became. We'd love to hear from you. Please rate this video on a scale of 1 to 10 in the comments section and share your favorite moment from the story in the comments. Was it the conservatory meeting? The lake garden proposal? That fierce moment when Alistair refused to let Marianne disappear? Your thoughts and engagement mean everything to us and help us create more stories that celebrate love at every age, second chances, and the courage to choose happiness even when society says it's too late. Coming soon, another breathtaking tale of unexpected romance, defied expectations, and hearts that refuse to give up on love. You won't want to miss it. Thank you for being part of this community, for believing in these stories, and for staying until the very end. You are seen, you are valued, and your own best chapters may still be waiting to unfold. With deepest gratitude and warmest wishes, Duke's Royal Library team.